Hey everybody, I'm Jason Mefford and I'm back with Brad Miller and we are walking a spiritual path today with you. And today we wanted to talk about something that, I think a lot of times things happen in our lives and we might want to say this, I don't know. I don't know, right? Now, saying I don't know actually carries a certain energy. And what I've heard my benefactors say quite often, that I've started saying to myself is, I'll know when I know, right? Meaning that, okay, right now, I may not fully understand or consciously understand what's happening, but I'm still going to act on the intuition and I will know when I know. And to me, it's a much more powerful stance to come from. They're much more powerful words. And so today we want to talk a little bit about that. So if you've been saying, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, maybe you can start saying, I'll know when I know. And so Brad, this was one that you had kind of brought up. So why don't you kind of share the story and we'll share some other stories, I'm sure from it as well.
hmm
But what happened to you, right, which is
hmm
kind of leading to us talking about I'll know when I know.
Yeah. So last week, I was sitting here at my desk in this actual chair. I'm not sure, I don't remember what I was doing, if I was working on something, if I was getting ready for bed. I don't remember what it was or when it happened last week. But at some point last week, I got a message, and it wasn't a voice per se, because it was inside my head, so it wasn't anything external, and it was in my kind of voice, so it wasn't like someone else talking to me and I was hearing it in my head. So it was me saying, "I need to get a blue candle," and I'm like, "Huh, okay." And not just any blue candle, but specifically a light blue candle. So that the detail there was important to me, light blue candle. And as you kind of alluded to, this is not the first time that something like this has come to me. Even especially with candles, I've had situations before where I've all of a sudden like, you know what, I need to go pick up a candle, a certain candle, or whatever like that. And so I go ahead and I pick up the candle, and at some point I figure out what I need to do with it. But I didn't know why I needed to pick up this blue candle. I didn't know why it needed to be a light blue candle
Mhm.
specifically. Like, why couldn't it have been yellow or red? But no, I needed to pick up a light blue candle. And I've never picked up a light blue candle before. So it was a new thing for me. But I to the point again where I don't question when things like that happen. I just go ahead and do it. Or I'm gonna go to the store and, a buck or two, I'm gonna buy myself a light blue candle. So this weekend I went to the store and got a light blue candle. Um, as I sit here and look at it, I still have no idea what it's for. Presumably it's to burn. It could be for some. I'm assuming it's not just something I just set on my desk and just leave it there as like a little, thing to stare at. But for some sort of, ritual or ceremony or something like that. But I don't know. I don't know why I needed a candle. I don't know why I needed a light blue candle. All I know is that I needed to go buy a light blue candle. And so light blue candle.
Mhm. Well, and it's really interesting because, like you said, I mean, this has happened to you before. I mean, I
hmm
remember, I think we talked before about one time you were supposed to go get a white candle,
Yep.
and it was the same thing, right? You got it, and it took a little while, right, for you to kind of
Yep.
understand or realize how you were supposed to use that white candle. So this isn't necessarily something new to
Right.
you. but I think it brings up a lot of things, and so I think we're going to talk about candles because I'm a fire sign and I use candles a lot. Literally, I have hundreds of candles in my house, and I use them for different purposes, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's interesting because I think, candles are one of those tools that sometimes we overlook, but have a huge, huge benefit and big purpose in how we can actually use them, right? And some of it you can see kind of carried over into some religions, like
Hmm.
specifically in the Catholic Church. There are places, where you go into the church and you light candles, and often we call them prayer candles, right?
Hmm.
Because I think often when people will go in, they'll say a prayer, light a candle, for whatever their prayer is. Maybe it's for a specific being, like Mother Mary, or other saints or things like that. But and we'll probably get into that a little bit more. But, I think it's interesting for people. I mean, this has been happening to you off and on for a while, so it's not
Hmm.
like it's new to you. You kind of understand when this comes in because you've been
Yep.
doing it, you've been practicing it. But I think, maybe if we can just talk a little bit about, because some of the people out there are going to be like, well, yeah, sometimes I have a thought like this and I maybe don't do anything about it,
Hmm.
right? And so how did you start to realize or kind of recognize that this was coming, like I said, in your voice? Because a lot of
Hmm.
times inspiration feels like it's us talking to ourselves, but it's not. Okay. Sometimes it's our higher self, sometimes it's other beings, but we often perceive it as if we're talking to ourselves.
Hmm.
So, what was kind of the process, or how did you start to kind of recognize and differentiate that versus just like monkeys in the tree kind of noise in your head? Because I
Yeah,
think
no.
sometimes that's what we do. We're like, that's a
Oh,
crazy
yeah.
thought. Why am I even having that?
Yeah, no, there's so I know it kind of goes to the conversation we've had in the past, and people they've just heard other places about the idea of kind of intuition and about getting signs. And I think we've had maybe an episode in the past where we talked about, there's different ways that you can receive signals, clairaudient, or if you hear things, clairvoyant, if you see them, things like that. Um, I tend to find that I'm a little more claircognizant. So I just kind of know things. Like all of a sudden I was like, oh, yeah. And it seems just perfectly obvious to me. And there's no doubt in my mind that it's true, that whatever it is, that's the case. And so that's something which is it's a tricky one because how do I know that that's not just my fears playing with me? Or like you said, the monkeys in the trees chattering about and just, oh yeah, go get this candle, go buy this, go spend money on that. Like, how do I know that this is something maybe legitimate versus just kind of my head going crazy? And for me, the way that I kind of distinguish it is that when it is fear, when it is the monkeys in my head, when it is just my brain kind of going crazy, there's usually some emotion behind it. So there's something in there. Maybe it's fear. That's a big one. If I'm sitting here and thinking I need to do this, or if I think maybe this is a sign, but I can feel fear behind it, like I'm afraid that that's what it is, then to me that's myself projecting that fear. My brain has have fear about something, and so it is trying to um, again put it out there and say, oh well, this is worst case scenario, this is going to happen. If you go out there, you're going to run the car off the ditch. Things like that. When you're kind of sitting there thinking about what's going on. And so anytime I have something like that come to me, I always kind of sit and think, is there emotion behind this? Like what's up with this? Um, Also, if it's something I've been thinking about recently. So if I was driving, I was thinking about how slippery the road was, and all of a sudden I'm like, you know what, over this corner, I better be careful. I'm going to run off the road. That to me also is a signal that it's my brain going to that worst case scenario, kind of going with the fear and things like that. It's not actually some sort of a message to me.
Hmm.
Um, when I do get messages, though, are things that don't have emotion behind them. There are things that are kind of out of the blue, just seem out of left field. Like I said, I was sitting here at my desk, and all of a sudden, I don't even know what I was doing. I can't remember what I was doing, but just the idea of I need to go get a blue candle popped in my head, you know. Um, and so it's not like it was something I was thinking about, and it was just kind of just part of that thought process. So that's another way that I can kind of suss out things that are more actual signals or things for me versus stuff that's just my head, just the monkeys chattering away back there in the trees.
Hmm. Well, I think that's a good way of thinking about it too. Like you said, when we've talked about this on previous episodes too, but when something just kind of comes in completely out of the blue, you weren't thinking about it. It wasn't, you can't, pinpoint it to anything that maybe that you were thinking about or experiences that you had. It's probably coming from the universe, right? Something
Mhm.
that you need to do. And one thing that I have started to do too is when those, because I'm more like you, the claircognizant, it's just all of a sudden I kind of have a knowing,
Mhm.
or sometimes I'll be having conversations with what appears to be myself in my head, and sometimes it's with my higher self, and sometimes it's with other beings. Um, I'll get confirmation about certain things. And I don't know if we've talked about this before or not, but there are things, there's yes and no questions that we can ask ourselves. And when you kind of know what a yes confirmation feels like, and it's different
Mhm.
for each person. Like for me, when I ask a question, if I get kind of this body sensation, it's kind of like a tingling or a energy, electricity kind of going through my body, usually kind of starting in my heart area and kind of resonating out. That when I ask yes and no questions, if I get that feeling, it's like a confirmation
Mhm.
of what I'm thinking, right? And
Mhm.
so, as an example, just yesterday or the day before, I can't remember, I was sitting on my porch. Same thing, just kind of, thinking. I don't even know what I was doing, and all of a sudden, I kind of get this thought in my head about some business things. And it, of course, was one of those things like, oh man, I knew this was probably coming and I didn't really want to have to do it. But I kind of stop and center myself and
Mhm.
ask to myself, is this what I need to do? Boom. Right. And I get the confirmation. It's like, so even though it's not necessarily something I want to do, and it's something that I had maybe contemplated for a little
Mhm.
while or had thought about back and forth, it's now spirit saying, okay, you've been thinking about this for a while. Now is the time,
Mhm.
right? And and by me asking, I kind of get that confirmation of what I need to do, right? And so like for you, I mean, and this is where again it's step by step, right? We never get to see the full thing. We have to go step by step because it's almost like we're being trained, we're being tested a little bit, right, to make sure that we're actually going to follow the guidance that we're given. And so, you've started down that path with this candle,
Mhm.
right? You got the idea. I need a candle. I need a light blue candle, right? So you
Yep.
you physically 3D went to the store, found a light blue candle, bought it, brought it home, right? So you kind
Mhm.
of acted upon that inspiration that you're given, and now What's the rest of
I'll
it? I don't,
I'll
you'll
know what
know
I
when you
know.
know, right? And so, I
Exactly
mean,
right.
that's the thing, because I know that's happened before to you, specifically with the
Hmm.
candles, right? You buy a candle, and then all of a sudden later, it's like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do with it.
Yep. Yeah, one time I was actually driving down the road close to the store, and all of a sudden I was like, I need to go stop at the store and buy 5 white candles. Totally out of the blue. Like I just had to turn my head and I was like, boom, there it was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know why I need to buy five, but okay. So I went and bought 5 candles, and sure enough, found uses for all 5 candles at some point. I mean, it took a while. It took maybe a year to go through all of them, but there was specific reasons I needed those candles, and they all had a purpose at that point. But with the candles, the nice thing about the candles is that it's such a low cost way thing. So I don't have to worry about, well, that's awful expensive. Like, what if that's not what I needed to do? Like, how do I afford that? Like, no, it's like $1.25 or something like that for a candle. So
Mhm.
it's very easy and expensive to go and try it out and verify to myself that, yep, this was something I'm supposed to do. Um, yeah, and pick up.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because maybe we talk a little bit about candles because, like I said, I use them a lot in my life, in my practices. Part of that is because I feel a connection to the fire element
Hmm.
because I'm a Leo, I'm a fire element, and so for me that just resonates. But it's also because of some of the things I've been taught from my benefactor as well, on how to use them, how we use them in our work together, and other things like that as well. And so it's interesting that we can use them as an offering is one way that we can use them, right? And so what that kind of looks like, because again, if we've talked before about the four cardinal directions, we've done episodes on each one of them, I think, as well,
All
right?
the different elements, yeah.
Yeah, and so north is usually air element, east is fire, south is earth, right? And west is water. And so, you can utilize each of those elements as offerings. And so candles, like I said, are one way to do that. In fact, I think it depends on the society that you're in, but really kind of in the West, in the US, the only place I really see candles used like that are in the churches. But in a lot of Eastern traditions and other things like that, they're used all the time in the shrines, where people will go in and light a candle
Hmm.
for a particular being, let's say. And so, I love candles. Okay. For a lot of different reasons. And in fact, same thing. I just a couple days ago, um, I have pictures of my younger brother who died when I was 15. Um, I wouldn't necessarily call it a shrine, but kind of a little bit, right? Because there's a reason why we became brothers in this world, why he left this world early, because his mission here was very short, but a lot of it was for my benefit, right? So I have a lot of love and gratitude for my brother, and so I have some pictures of him in my house, and just a couple days ago, I was setting up, some other offerings, some of which using candles, and walked by that picture of my brother, and I said, you need to light a candle for your brother. And so I got a candle and I put it in front of the picture and I lit it, and I thought of him and the gratitude and the love that I have for him, and I lit that candle. And there's one thing that's interesting about candles too that I'll share with everybody that you might not know is like the candle that Brad showed. It's often called a 7-day candle. It's
Mhm.
tall, it's long, it burns for many days. They call them 7-day candles, but they burn at differing rates because I use a lot of 7-day candles. Some of them last for 4 days, 5 days, 6 days. Some may go to 7 days. And the intensity with which they burn, there's a reason for that too. But we won't get into that right now. But what I was going to share with you is, those specific kinds of candles are within that tall glass, right? And so as they start to burn down, normally fire, a flame, if you will, without air, without wind blowing on it, will just sit there and will burn straight. It
Right.
doesn't necessarily flicker, right? But when you use candles, in a way, it helps to kind of call in the spirits, if you will, and you can tell if they are around or if they are pleased with your offering because the flame flickers. It flickers in a way that would not be normal in 3D because there's no wind blowing on it, if that makes sense, right? And so that's one way, as well, that we can kind of see in the 3D what's actually going on,
Hmm.
right? And again, it's a way of uh again, if we utilize like the example of prayer candles in churches, it's very similar in that, think of it this way. You go in, you offer a prayer, you light a candle, and that prayer kind of continues, right? Throughout the time that it's going, because as it's burning, it's producing energy and it's doing things in the background that we don't actually realize, right? And so, in a way, it's kind of like a continuation of the prayer, a continuation of whatever you ask for, a continuation of maybe the love and gratitude that you're sending, while that candle is actually burning. So
Hmm.
that's the first part. So I'm going to stop for a minute so we can we're going to go back and forth a little bit here because obviously there's
Yeah,
more stuff I can share too. But
sure. No, yeah, like I said, yeah, I don't even know where to go from there. Uh, like, um, like I said, I've in the past had, I don't know what you call feeling drawings, I don't know, messages, whatever, something told me to get the candles and to use them. Um, and again, I don't know like you said, there are many different reasons to light a candle and they can be used for. And, I don't know what this one is going to be for. What of that may be here. If it's going to be that it's for a particular being, if it's that needs to be lit in remembrance of a person. I've done that before too, where I've lit it specifically kind of for a person. Um, I don't know if it is what specifically, that is supposed to be for. But um, I've got a place that I have my candles, and like I said, for something like this, will when I get a message or some sort of a sign that it's time to light it, I will light it and do whatever needs to happen along with it, whether that's like I said, give thanks or gratitude, or if it is some sort of a ritual, whatever it might be, and then I will let it do its thing. And like you said, sometimes the flame flickers a bit, even though you're kind of wondering why it's flickering because there's really nothing to cause it. Um, Sometimes the candle doesn't burn all the way down. Sometimes it stops. Sometimes it burns all the way to the bottom and like doesn't even leave any sort of remaining like wax or anything. Um, but
Yeah, and each one of them, it's interesting because I'll share maybe a couple of examples of how I use it because, like I said, literally I have hundreds of candles in my home, and so there was, this week, some of the candles that are still burning, and the reasons why, right, is there's a particular ancestor in my kind of extended family who passed away. This was kind of an anniversary of her passing, and so in the tradition from where she was from, it's customary, we'll say, right, to leave a drink of alcohol and a piece of some kind of bread for the person. And so, based on the different kinds of alcohol I had in my home, it's like, okay, what would you like? Right. And I was doing this with a friend, and and so we kind of went through, okay, well, tequila, vodka, rum, blah, 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 right, and lots of whiskey, different things, and decided, no, I think she would like port.
hmm,
And so we poured a little glass of port and put a little cracker on top. That was kind of in the uh, tradition from where she was from, right, as a way to honor ancestors. But also chose to light a candle for her. And so there's a candle and shot glass and a little cracker in my house right now, honoring and sending love to her, right, for what she has done in this world and the connection that we have with her. And so, it was the same thing that we did with the alcohol was, okay, come into my room where I have all my candles and open the door, and it's like, what color candle would you like? And we both went pink, right? So she wanted a pink candle. And it, again, it's not because she's a woman, female, that has to be pink, but that was what she wanted. If she would have said blue or green or white, right? We were just trying to honor her and provide the kind of offering that would be, pleasing to her, right? And I think we've talked about this before with things like food offerings,
hmm,
that we can give, and I still don't fully understand, everything behind it, but I do know that, there's certain smells and things like that are more pleasing to beings, and so they choose to have certain kinds of fruit or alcohol or other things like that if you're gonna do some kind of a food offering. A safe option is rum, white rum, if you don't have anything else. But if you tune in, sometimes they're like, no, I want tequila. And I don't just want tequila, I want mezcal, right? So there's one being that I have some mezcal, that when I, offer to him, it's mezcal because that's what he prefers, right? And so, with the candles, sometimes the colors mean something, sometimes they don't, right? And I can't get into all of the what the candle colors necessarily mean here, but there is a reason often for the color. So
hmm,
there's a reason why Brad needs a light blue candle. because for whatever purpose he's going to use that at some point, it's more pleasing for it to be a light blue candle. Now, there are, different color combinations or other candles that are for specific purposes or designed for specific beings as well, right? Like I have some candles that have a sticker
Mm-hmm.
of Mother Guadalupe on it
Mm-hmm.
because I honor and love and work with her and ask for her assistance at times. And so, when I'm making an offering to Mother Guadalupe, that's the candle I choose to burn, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm working with other beings, like some of the Orishas, they each have specific colors that are associated with them. And so again, you can go Google it and look it up, but each one of and there's hundreds of Orishas, but of the main seven or eight that most people, know about, each one of them is associated with a particular color or usually two color combination. And so, if you're going to make an offering to an Orisha, it's more pleasing if you actually burn a candle, right, that is associated with their color combination. And there's a reason for it. I don't understand everything behind it, right? But, if a particular being wants that, then, why not make something that's pleasing to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, Brad, I don't know, what's your favorite kind of cookie? Ooh, that's a
Uh,
tough one. Is that a tough one?
Probably, yeah, it's a tough one. I'm gonna say, since I put it on the spot, butterscotch oatmeal.
Butterscotch oatmeal. Okay, so great. So now we know Brad prefers or really loves butterscotch oatmeal cookies, right? So if I'm going to make a gift to Brad, if I'm going to bake cookies for Brad, I could bake snickerdoodles and give to him. I could
That'd be cool
bake
too, but
I could bake chocolate chip cookies, right? And I'm sure Brad wouldn't turn them down.
right.
But wouldn't he prefer the butterscotch oatmeal? And so if I know that, shouldn't I offer a gift of butterscotch oatmeal cookies to him if that's what he prefers?
Right.
So, um, it's a little bit about candles that we kind of got off on a side thing on
We
too,
did.
but it's still it kind of comes back and like we've got, the title is I know when I know. Right. And I think that's where sometimes the spiritual path, some people find it challenging until we can kind of let go and realize I'll know when I know. I don't have to know right now because obviously, for whatever reason, I don't need to know right now. But when
Yeah.
Brad needs to burn the candle, he's going to know
Mm-hmm.
when and he's going to know for what purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that will be given to him
Yeah.
at that point. And sometimes things go for years before we know. And I'm going to share a little story here too because I think sometimes we think, oh well, when I become enlightened or when I become, so much more spiritual, then I'm just going to know all the time. It's not that way. Okay. In fact, here's a little story. My benefactor actually had a particular object for a while that he loved. And somebody kind of, badgered him about it and wanted to buy it from him and kept offering more and more money and, whatever. And ultimately he let that thing go, right? Again, no attachment per se, but it was something that he loved. And so, let it go. And I remember, talking with him, he kind of not necessarily a remorse, but kind of a boy, it'd be nice to have that again, right? And so I found something that was as close of a replica or as close to what he had as I could find, right?
Hmm.
Because I went hunting for it because I wanted to help replace what he had lost, right?
And give him the color of candle he wanted, essentially.
Right? That's what he was wanting, right? So if
Hmm.
I'm going to give a gift, it might as well be something that is something people want. Now,
Hmm.
I found it. I gave it to him, and you could see the smile on his face. Again, even though it's like no attachment, kind of a thing,
Hmm.
but he was grateful for it because it's a tool that he can actually use as well. And I didn't give it to him for, any reason other than I wanted to help replace what he had lost because I love him, right? And so I give it to him. He, kind of plays with it for a little bit and then kind of sets it aside because we were talking as a group. And we go on, and all of a sudden he gets really quiet. And he just kind of sits there for a few minutes and he says, "Do you like flutes?" And I said, "Yeah, I have a flute." He's like, "Hmm, I have a flute that I want to give to you." And I'm like, "You don't have to. I didn't give you the gift, to get a flute. There
Hmm.
was there was no expectation of anything coming back. That's not the intention,
Hmm.
right?" But but he's like, "No, no, I need to give you this flute." And I'm like, "Why?" He says, "Well, several years ago, I bought a flute and I decided to buy two of the same flute. And at the time, I didn't know why I needed two of the same flutes." And he said, "Now I know, because it belongs to you." Okay. So even, elevated spiritual beings, when we get the guidance, we act on it. We don't have to understand. We'll know when we know. And he told me that even in that conversation. He's like, "I always wondered why I needed two. Now I know." And it's like, oh, right. And so it can be little things. It can be years in between. It could literally be after we spin out of this body, when we finally understand or know some of the things. And it doesn't matter when, right? But the more we can tap into and do like what Brad is talking about, when he gets a thought coming in his head, "Hey, I need to go buy a candle. Hey, I need to go buy a blue candle." Right? The more he does that, the more those things are going to come through. The more we do it, the more we practice it, the easier it becomes,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of the whole purpose of us talking today, but also to help, share maybe a little bit more about candles for those of you that are interested. I
Hmm.
like to use them. It may be your thing, it may not be your thing. It's up to you. But, for those of you that maybe want to start incorporating some of those things into your practices, that's some of the ways that I use them.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I could go way down the rabbit hole, but I can't tell you a lot of stuff about it.
Right. No, we've talked about that a couple episodes too about do no harm. So
Yeah, exactly.
all that
Exactly.
stuff. But no, I think one point I do want to make though, I think is really important is that, you know, someone says I need this blue candle, but it doesn't matter why I need it. When I get that message, it doesn't matter why. Well, why do I need to get that candle? What's the purpose? What am I gonna use it for? None of that matters. All that matters is that I follow what the guidance is and I get the candle. And then I just wait until I get further guidance on it. And maybe when I get the guidance, I still won't really know what the purpose of the candle is. Like it may, say, okay, I need to do this with it. But kind of like you talked about, Jason, with some of the colors of different candles, you don't, at the end of the day, really know what some of them stand for. You just know this is what they like. That may be the case with this one too. I may
Mhm.
not ever know why it has to be this color or why I have to burn it for a certain individual or at a certain time. But it doesn't matter. I don't need to know.
Yeah.
All I need to do is just follow the guidance, and that's it. And
Well,
whatever happens will happen. Whatever needs
when
to
we're
happen will there.
when we're ready, we'll know, right? So it's the same thing. It's like I don't fully I understand some behind, the different colors and configurations and other things like that that you may use them for. But I'm also leaning into it each time,
Hmm. Sure.
right? On
Hmm.
on, if it's time, let me know. What does this mean? Right? Because um, it's always nice to know if we can, but that's not necessarily, again, like you said, that's not the purpose.
Right.
We don't have to know why. We don't even have to know what it's doing.
Hmm.
Okay, because I think that's another thing that sometimes people are like, well, if I light this candle, what am I actually doing? Well, it doesn't really matter. Okay, there's way more things going on in the ethers with that candle than you can ever imagine. And it doesn't matter, right? If again, your intention is, hey, I want to honor my brother, I want to light a candle for him because I love him and I'm thinking about him, that's all I need to know. I got the guidance, I got the candle, I lit it. It's all I need to know. But I know
Hmm.
lots of other things were going on behind the scenes that, for whatever reason, I don't know right now, but that's okay. I'll know when I know. And if
Hmm.
it doesn't happen in this life, that's fine too, right? And that's part of kind of the going on faith in a way that we have to kind of go with,
Hmm.
right? Is we'll learn a little bit more with every step that we take.
Yep. And as we go down the path, we may pick up bits and pieces and a little bit better understanding, and maybe that's part of, again, quieting the mind and leaning into what's happening. And, um, but again, at the end of the day, for me, it doesn't really matter why the things have to happen that they do.
Yep.
All I know is that this is what I've been guided to do, and so that's what I'm going to do. And like I said, everything will work out the way that it needs to because that's what's meant to happen. So, so don't get too like in your head if you start getting messages to do things. Try to worry about why you're doing it. It
Well,
doesn't matter.
try to logically
Exactly.
understand it,
Yeah,
because
because
it's not
if you
going
try.
to go. And sometimes there's, like Brad talked about, I need 5 white candles. Well, sometimes you need 5 white candles because the number 5 is important to you at that particular point. Sometimes that can be, right? But also it could be, hey, we know that Brad's going to need 5 candles in this next year, so Brad, go buy the 5 right now, and we'll tell you when to use them.
Right.
And just have to be comfortable in that darkness of the present moment of not knowing what's coming next, but we will know when we know.
Yep.
So.
Exactly right. So,
So, with that, everybody, we're going to wrap up for this week. But thanks for listening. Blessings to you for listening. And we're glad that you're on the spiritual path too, and can take some things that we talked about today, if nothing more than the energy of love that we were attempting to send out to you for listening as well. And we'll see you on the next video.
catch you guys then.
See ya.